With us today is Troy Monteith. He is the Northeast Regional Sales Manager for Guardian. He's been with them for over 2.5 years, and he was kind enough to come in here today to talk about what Guardian does, what they can do with us, and what we can do with all that information to help our customers and make sure that we're out there in the marketplace and we are providing good quality safety and emergency equipment and solutions to our customers. So tell us about Guardian equipment and how you differentiate yourself to the other companies that are dealing in emergency stuff.
Yeah, great question, and thank you for having me here today. So that question comes up quite a bit, right? About how you differentiate yourself from other competitors. But first, I'll start that we're made in the USA. Some of the other competitors are as well. Made out of Chicago, Illinois, privately owned company, third generation owned, which is nice. Small business, very reactive to our customers' needs. But really what differentiates ourselves from our competition out there is that we actually quality test every unit that goes out the factory. So a lot of manufacturers will sample test, meaning they'll do one out of every 10, 50, 100 units. We actually run water through every single one of our units, whether it's an emergency fixture or a valve. Every single one. Which is why when you get the box, you open it up, you turn it over, and it's one big clunk or thuds because the product's already assembled, it's already tested before it leaves the factory.
Okay. Everyone out in the field has seen some form of eye washers and showers, but I guess I'd like to know why are they required and why at some places and not others. Like I sweat a lot, so I would love an emergency shower in my office. I would just sit under there, like flash dance and take care of myself once a week when I'm hot. But why do some places have them? Not where should we be looking?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of an anomaly, right? Because most people don't want an eye wash or a shower. I know you're saying that tongue in cheek, but as far as it goes, facilities don't want an emergency eye wash or shower. They're not like, oh, wow, let me use some of my capital budget, right? To go out and buy some fixtures. So why do they do it? And it's because of code. So OSHA and all the local plumbing codes, national plumbing codes, even international, point to one standard. And that standard is ANSI Z358.1. And with that standard, it sets the minimum requirements for emergency eye wash and a shower, how they should perform, and when you need to have a piece of equipment available. And the answer to that is that anytime that there's a injurious or corrosive material, anything to get into your eyes, your face. So think of it, if I pour a chemical on my arm, if it's an irritant, or if I get in my eyes, it's going to cause some damage. I should have an eye wash or shower present.
Okay. And is it based on occupancy or proximity, or how do they determine how many of these things or where they go?
So proximity. So it used to be that the code called for 10 seconds walking distance between point A, the hazard, and then point B, the emergency fixture. Well, the issue with that is that someone like myself, 5'8" versus someone who's 6'5", you can imagine have different strides. And then we have individuals with different abilities. So having said that, they went down and they quantified it, 55 feet. So between point A and then point B, you have to have 55 feet or less between the emergency fixture and then the emergency or the piece of equipment that could cause a hazard.
All right, so we often see faucet-mounted eye washes. Of course, there's the individual ones. Is that faucet-mounted eye wash code, is it qualify, or how is that differentiated and designated?
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, what you're describing is like there's a faucet and then it's like a gooseneck. And then on the end of that, I got 2 spray heads and I got like a pull activation. So I see them all the time when I go to the dentist office, right? And what's frustrating to me, right, because I'm in this industry, is that they're not code compliant. And the reason being they're not. Because if I think about it, I go up to the faucet, I have to do what to turn on the water? I have to grab a blade, cold, hot, right? And then I gotta set it to the right temperature. And then from there, I have to pull down that unit to have the water going through the spray heads. Well, why it's not compliant is code says it has to be one-touch activation. And so what that means is I can push, I can pull, and I can let go. It's going to stay on as I've activated it. This unit that you described to me, I got to turn it on, right, the water, and then I have to pull or I have to push. That additional step makes it non-code compliant.
So we see out there an eye wash and we see an eye face wash. What is the difference?
So it comes up pretty frequently. So the unit and the body of it, of an eye wash or shower face wash, it's all the same. The only difference is going to be the spray heads. So you can actually change in the field going from an eye wash to a face wash. And to answer your question, it's just the flow rate of water. So for an Eyewash here, it's a smaller spray head. Flow control in there gives 1.6 GPM of water. So you got 2 of them, so 3.2 total, which is more than what code requires. And then you have a Facewash, which is actually going to give out 3.2 GPM per spray head. And so you have 2 of these, which is going to be 6.4 GPM. And the only difference is going to be, again, the flow rate. So if I'm an end user, I'm an EH&S or facilities manager, I'm thinking about what's the chemical in use in the space, what's the hazard, and what's the likelihood, am I going to get it splashed into my eyes? Mm-hmm. Is it likely going to be on my face? Is it going to get on my body? Well, just the eyes, I would go with an Eyewash. With the face, if I want more coverage, I would go with the Facewash.
Okay, but the Facewash one,
yes.
Should someone opt for that, it's certainly going to do what the Eyewash does, or is it less effective on the eye if it's supposed to be doing the whole face?
Yeah, so it's not going to be less effective on the eye. Okay. It's just going to give you more coverage. So instead of leaning over, holding open your eyes, and then just hitting the eyes, now it's going to hit the eyes with the same amount, but it's also going to hit the rest of your face to clean it off as well.
So this is kind of more of your one-stop shop. That's going to do it all for you if from here up is an issue.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So if I'm a facilities manager and I want to go, what is the safest route? Code considers these to be equal. Which one am I going to do? I'm going to go with the Facewash.
I got you. So out in the field or in literature, we see tempered water and then we see tepid water. Are both those phrases applicable to the code, or what are we talking about with one or the other, and what matters?
Yeah, tepid water is used in code.
Okay.
Tempered water is not when it comes to ANSI. And so what they define tepid as, and every time, we have a conversation, end user, someone with BEST, it should be around the words of tepid water. Okay. And how it's defined is 60 degree Fahrenheit to 100 degree Fahrenheit water. And so as long as you are in that range per ANSI, you're okay. You have to remain tepid. So I activate an Eyewash, it stays on. Mm-hmm. It has to stay tepid for a duration of 15 minutes.
Okay.
If it does not stay tepid that entire time, meaning if you remember the range is 60 to 100, it drops below 60 for even just a few seconds, it's not going to pass code requirements.
So you talked about making sure that tepid water maintains the temperature the code says for that 15-minute period, which means we have to have something behind it, which I'm assuming is a mixing valve,
yes,
to make sure that is happening. Tell us, are they typically a dedicated mixing valve? Are they part of a bigger network, say in that science classroom? How are we going to know if you got that right mixing valve, and what should they be looking for? What is that valve about?
Yeah, so what we should see when we go into an end user facility, K through 12, higher education, wherever it may be, we walk in, we want to see the mixing valve, 1-to-1 ratio or dedicated to that emergency fixture.
Okay.
And the reason being is that you're not just having any plumbed piece of equipment or fixture. This is an emergency piece of equipment, right? So we got to make sure that when we use it, it's going to operate when we go to use it. We can't wait 20, 30 seconds, a minute, a couple minutes to get to tepid water.
Right.
Because what's going to happen, I lean over, it's cold temperature, I'm somewhere in the northeast, right? It's too cold, I get a little bit of a shock, I get out, it's counterproductive, right? I'm not flushing my eyes properly. So from a code perspective, going back to ANSI, they require a special type of valve, which is the ASSE 1071 valve, which I brought with us today. And this is Guardian's new mixing valve. So typically when you go and you identify there's a piece of equipment, let's just call it an Eyewash in the area, somewhere nearby on that wall or in maybe up above a ceiling tile, right? Mm-hmm. There's going to be a mixing valve. What you want to go do is take a look at that mixing valve. Typically there's serial codes and stamped on there, and you want to see ASSE and then 1071. Okay. If it's not a 1071 valve, and oftentimes it's not, you're not code compliant. So we'll see an end user or internal plumbing team use a fixture because they have some in spare parts, and it's just a typical valve that you would see underneath the sink. The problem with that is that code requires, in the event that your cold water gets shut off, right, that hot water has to be positively shut off, meaning no hot water goes through the valve. Because if you think about it, I pull the shower, I activate it. Someone has shut off the cold water supply. Now I'm getting hit with 140, 150 degree Fahrenheit water.
Right.
I'm getting burns, right? And the opposite applies, that if the hot water shuts off, that cold water has to be able to permeate and flow through the valve still. Because from a code perspective, cold water is better than no water.
Right.
So a few things that differentiate, and to answer your question, 1-to-1 ratio most likely for the valve,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be a 1071 valve.
I got you. So I'll just use the science room because I used to seeing that at school.
Yeah.
If I had an eyewash in the room and a shower, they should both have their own mixing valve.
Yeah, so you can potentially take one valve.
Mm-hmm.
So this valve right here, our G6020, is a 13-gallon capacity valve.
Okay.
An eyewash is typically 3.2 GPM. So in theory, if you have two eyewashes at 3.2 each, you have 6.4 GPM.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have one unit to supply both.
Right.
But a few things you have to consider is there enough pressure getting to my valve? So these are tested at 30 PSI.
Yeah.
And between this fixture here and that fixture there, is there going to be enough pressure due to pressure loss by the time it gets there and there to be able to supply both of them adequately?
I got you.
So typically that decision is being made by an in-house engineering group
Mm-hmm.
or a technician.
I got you.
But it can be done to answer your question.
So after you put in the right eyewash, face wash, shower, it's in the proximity it's supposed to be. If they don't have the proper mixing valve,
Not code compliant.
not code compliant.
Correct.
Okay. So we've been in places, we see the charts that you got to test these things and turn them on, turn them off, make sure they're ready to happen. Is it by facility or is it just that one straight code? How often do they have to test and what is the test?
Yeah, so code is actually very stringent on this. It's black and white. So if I'm OSHA or if I'm coming in for an inspection of a facility, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the piece of emergency equipment and I'm going to check that tag. And that tag is going to say, okay, someone's initials or name and then the date that they checked it. Code says you have to check it weekly.
Weekly.
Every single week. So every time I go talk to end users, the engineers who specify this,
Mm-hmm.
Contractors, everyone comes up with a different answer, monthly, annually, biannually. It's actually weekly.
It's weekly for everybody.
For everybody. And the response we get is it's cost prohibitive, right? Or it's costly to have someone go out within the staff to go test on a weekly basis. But that's what code requires. Now, the test is a visual test. So you go and you look at the piece of equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, you would say, okay, we were talking about mixing valves earlier. Between my mixing valve to my emergency fixture, there's a dead leg of plumbed pipe there, meaning that there's water that's just sitting in between the valve to this unit.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that I turn on the eyewash with the push handle. If it's shower, I pull it down. I let it run 1, 2, 3 seconds, and then I shut it off. And what I'm doing is I'm emptying out that dead leg of water. And so, especially K through 12, higher education, hospitals, they're concerned about Legionella or bacteria growth.
Right.
So if they're testing it weekly, they're flushing out that dead leg of water, new supply of water comes in, less likely to have bacteria growth.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you not want to have when you activate an eyewash? Last thing you want is dirty water hitting your face.
Right. Okay, and I'm glad you cleared that up because I've had people say, I'm not testing, I can't let that thing run for 30, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not a full test, it is. Just make sure it's going to turn on when you want it to turn on.
That's right. And so the full 15-minute test is required once a year. So your PM group would go out, facilities, or sometimes it'll be contracted to an outside third party. They'll come in and they'll go through and they'll test every piece of equipment and they'll test it for a full 15-minute duration. Does it stay tepid water the entire time? Is the unit installed correctly? Are there any obstructions? They'll go through all that test. But every week, no. Just visual inspection, a couple seconds to deplete that dead leg, and you're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist off the spray head, right, counterclockwise, and what you're going to see in this spray head is a mesh filter. If you do not test the units weekly, what's going to happen to this mesh filter is it's going to get calcium, other kind of mineral deposits in it, and it's going to clog up.
Okay.
And what happens if you clog up the filter where water is supposed to flow? Water is not going to be coming through the spray head.
So ADA requirements find their way into everything. So we are assuming that they have found their way into emergency equipment. Tell us about ADA compliance and eye washes and showers in your products.
But typically, a facility will know whether it's ADA compliant or not,
Okay.
because they'll see their corridors, right?
Right.
Their fire extinguishers are ADA compliant. There's other fixtures in that building that are ADA compliant. Very common, K through 12, higher ed, hospitals, right?
Mhm.
Is commonly where we see ADA compliant. Private sector, maybe a little bit less. But one common mistake or misconception is that emergency fixtures, meaning shower, eye wash, face wash, that they're all the same.
Right.
And that's incorrect. If you have an ADA compliant facility, there's a different subset of emergency eye washes and showers to be considered.
Okay.
And so what that means is someone comes with a disability in that facility. If I go to activate a standard emergency shower, I have a triangular handlebar that I'm going to pull down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm in a wheelchair, I'm not going to be able maybe to reach that.
Right.
So from finished floor up to that bar, it lowers down for an ADA compliant unit. So when I activate it, I can actually reach it.
Okay.
Same thing with the push handle, right, for the eye wash. And if I'm going to an eye wash similar to this table and I'm in a wheelchair, I want to be able to roll myself underneath of it without hitting my knees.
Right.
If you think about a standard, and we've seen them at facilities, pedestal mounted units, you're going to hit your knees on that pedestal, right?
Yes.
So what you're going to see is that it's offset, so someone can roll underneath of it and then activate the shower or the eye wash, use it appropriately without hitting an obstruction.
Mm-hmm. We've heard all about the Guardian products. Now it's time to go down to the workbench. Troy is going to show us a lot of the Guardian products that are applicable to your facility. They need to be there. They need to be working correctly. They need to be code compliant. And so we'll take a look now, and Troy will demonstrate some of those things so that everyone is up to snuff and knowledgeable and totally understands what it is about emergency equipment that they need to have to keep the people in their facilities safe.
All right, I brought a few products here to share with you today. The first one being which are non-ANSI compliant, non-code compliant eye washes that you may spot out there in the field. So I see them all the time when I go to the dentist, when I go to the hospital, even K through 12 sites, higher education. So I go to a sink, there's a gooseneck faucet, and then on there I see two spray heads and something that's been screwed or threaded onto that gooseneck faucet. And so basically what we have here is a multi-touch activation piece of emergency equipment, meaning in order for me to activate this eye wash, I have to turn on the water, hot, cold, and I have to go ahead and then pull this little piece here. And in pulling that piece, I then activate the water to go through. If you recall, code requires one touch activation. So if you see a unit like this, or if you see a unit like this out in the field, you want to go ahead and identify with that end user another alternative product that is ANSI compliant. And to share an example of one that is really good and popular out in the field as a replacement is a deck mounted eye wash. And what's nice about this unit is that you can go in and drill in the countertop, or you can place this on a wall with a wall mounting bracket. So it would sit up on the wall, and you can put it anywhere. So imagine this is a countertop for a sink. You have the sink in the middle. I can put it to the left, to the right, behind it, wherever it makes sense for the end user. What makes this ANSI compliant is one touch activation. So I have something in my eyes, I walk up to the eye wash, I push it, I let go, and you see the locking clip, you may have heard it, activates. And that locking clip stays in activation position, meaning that the unit is operating, water's flowing through for as long as it needs to. I can then touch it, pull off that clip, and it lets go. It's now turned off. So great utility, a good alternative for you to recommend when you're walking through a facility with non-ANSI compliant pieces of equipment. Do not forget that in order to be code compliant, you need to have a 1071 mixing valve or a source of tepid water. 1071 mixing valve just so happens to be the most commonly used piece of equipment to get tepid water. So again, in the event that hot water fails, cold water is allowed to permeate through it. That's one of the features of 1071. Another feature is that if cold fails, hot water is positively shut off, so you're not going to scald yourself when using the unit. one thing that may come up as you're walking through a facility, the maintenance manager supervisor may want to actually inspect the unit. It's important to note that the shutoffs for your hot and for your colds are on top of these threaded screws right here. And all you need is a flathead screwdriver to put in place there and then turn it down. And in turning this thread down, you're going to shut off the hot and the cold water supply on both sides. After you turn it off, you can then unscrew the union and you can go ahead and then pop out the filter. This stainless steel mesh filter kind of looks like a top hat from Monopoly. Actually comes to a peak on the inside there, and as water is coming through, it hits that peak. It's pushing the debris that's in the water or any minerals to the outside of that filter. And what that does is it allows for the uninterrupted flow of water to go through the filter into the mixing valve. One thing that can impede the proper use of a 1071 valve is if this filter gets clogged up, which is why you would turn off the hot and cold water supply, open it up, and you would say, okay, it looks clean, or, oh, let me go ahead and clean this, take it to a sink, wash it out, knock out the debris, and then you would stick it right back into the valve. So these are GS spray heads, general spray heads. That's what the GS stands for. This unit here, very popular around sinks. So basically, it would sit stationary. Imagine a sink right here. I'm the end user, get something in my eyes. I'm standing over on this side of the table. I pull or push to activate. And as I swing this auto flow valve, it allows the water to come through. Water permeates through the tops of the spray heads here, and it's over the sink. The sink collects the water. To turn it off, I just turn it back over, and now it's in non-operating mode. But we talked about the spray heads earlier, these being the general spray heads. We were talking about 1.6 GPM each flow of water, the flow rate. I can go ahead and turn these counterclockwise to screw off, right? So off comes the spray head. And now, if I wanted to replace both of these, not just one, I would go ahead and take a face spray head, which is going to have 3.2 GPM as far as the flow rate. And it's easy as just putting it on and then turning clockwise. And then from there, we have now a face wash instead of an eye wash.
Troy, thank you for not only answering our questions, but for coming out here, for showing us the products that you did down on the workbench. We do appreciate that. We appreciate the work that you do with us. And more importantly, we appreciate that you're out here telling us that we got to keep our people safe. I mean, this is for real. This isn't just nice stuff to have at your facility. Mm-hmm. It's critical. So in times of emergency, and emergencies happen, right?
All the time.
Yeah. Never expected it. So the stuff has to be up to snuff, working code. So thank you for coming out here. I think there's been a wealth of information, and everyone who watched this is now smarter. Thank you.
Cool.